Thank you so much for joining us, gamers. This is the second season of the Level Up Your Life podcast, and I couldn't be more excited to have you all back. I am absolutely thrilled to have found a Final Fantasy XIV lore creator, and I am ecstatic to welcome you today, Cleretic. Thank you so much for joining me. Did you want to introduce yourself?
I might as well. Hi, my name is Cleretic, she, her pronouns. I make a bunch of big dumb lore videos on YouTube. I try to be like a lot looser and more casual on that than some of the other people in the same sort of niche because I know that this is silly as hell.
But it's such a welcome niche. Like I was genuinely disappointed when a couple of my main Final Fantasy lore creators just seemingly disappeared out of nowhere, and there seemed to be a little bit of a vacuum for a time. Did you notice that, or?
Um, I was sort of vaguely aware of it because I started this. I joke that I started it because I noticed too many people being wrong about the Asians.
Mm.
And one of the things that like drove me to it was noticing that at the time that I was deciding to do something about that, which was like right around the end of like the Shadowbringers patch cycle, like a lot of the existing videos about the Asians were fairly old. Like none of them were really talking about Fandaniel, and a lot of them had missed a Meriloth, which is understandable because look, they're often a weird part of side content. um, so I thought like, okay, there's a niche for doing like more recent stuff, and also there's a niche for doing like one with a bit of a less serious air because a lot of them like I love a lot of these other lore creators, but a lot of them are like very self-serious, and many of them are very focused on the
Mm.
actual like story as it's been given and sort of internal to the actual game. So like, no, sometimes we have to like step back and realize like, oh yeah, this is like a weirdo reference to Yu-Gi-Oh.
Mm. Yeah, no, exactly. And the localization team has done a fantastic job of putting all sorts of those pulp culture references and Easter eggs and stuff in the game.
Well,
Do
the
you find
Yu-Gi-Oh one wasn't even them.
my God. Um, do you find there's a lot of discrepancy between sources like the Eorzean Encyclopedia or the game as it was back in A Realm Reborn
um,
compared to now? Or
there, so there are, but I would not find them actually particularly egregious. Like something
Mm.
that someone pointed out in like the comments of one of my recent video on the Encyclopedia 3 uh, is that Final Fantasy 14 is pretty unique in this sense, in that for a lot of other like franchises that do these sorts of like sort of lore encyclopedia things like Legend of Zelda and World of Warcraft, like those aren't actually considered very good, even among the actual fan bases. Like a lot of them are like filled with retcons or themselves just get retconned. I once actually did a review of like the first two encyclopedias of how much of this information is like actually outdated in some way. It's like irrelevant or it was retconned. And I found like 8 pages in the first encyclopedia and none in the second.
oh wow.
And most of those pages were actually things like when the job description, like the pages on the jobs, they they go over descriptions of like skills and all that, and some of those skills just aren't in the game anymore.
Right. Oh, wow. That is surprising. Well,
Yeah,
thank you so much for sharing that tidbit. We are here to talk about how gaming has positively impacted your life and to tell some really happy, wonderful stories about gaming. If you're ready, we can continue.
absolutely.
Awesome. So, can you tell us about your earliest memories of playing video games?
My very first memory at all is of a video game. It is of my dad playing the Angry Sun level from Mario Brothers 3, and
Ah,
I don't
yeah, yeah.
remember him being very good at it, but like that's the first one, and also the first story that my that either of my parents can even tell about me that isn't just about like having a baby. Uh, is also about video games, which is that like apparently I would like request to just like watch them play games, like not actually play them, just like watch them and sort of see how they go, which might have been where that memory of mine came about. And and then one day I just asked if I could play, and the actual game that I was playing that has changed in various retellings. It is either also Mario Brothers 3 or it's Wario's Woods. But either way, I picked it up and I was playing it as well as my dad was.
Awesome. So you belong solidly in that Nintendo generation.
Um, Very much so. I've sort of like gravitated away from it over time, just because like there's other games
Mhm.
out in the world. But yeah, like I have a Nintendo Switch over there.
Right.
So yeah, that sort of does explain that. And yeah, like my first like memory of video games like with context is playing Mario Kart 64 and really trying to get to like an island on a stage that was like completely inaccessible, and deciding like I bet I can like swing some like weird shell games to like knock myself over there and just see what happens. As I remember, I did do that.
Wow. So you've never played inside the box, so to speak.
Well, I love like playing inside. I want to play inside the box. Actually, it's just that like
Okay.
eventually you get a bit bored of it,
There you
and
go.
so yeah,
I
yeah,
understand. I understand. Speed running and all that stuff is a thing for a reason. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. I'm bad at speed running, but I love watching it.
What's your all-time favorite game and why?
Okay, so there are a lot of games that are running in that contention. So like instead of trying to figure out like the objective number one and really like trying to equivocate hard on that, I decided that I'd just go for the one that I don't think that I'll be talking about any other time in this interview, which is Metroid Prime.
Oh, wow.
The yeah, which like it sort of like cemented my love of sci-fi. It was like one of the very first like serious bits of sci-fi that I'd ever actually like experienced. It was like that and like Gundam Wing when it was airing on Cartoon Network that I could never like reliably pin down. Uh, but yeah, it really cemented that. It's a fantastic game in its own right. And it also was the first game that really showed me how interesting sort of like lore and world building can actually be. Because if someone hasn't played Metroid Prime,
Mm.
a big part of it is the scan visor, where you can just like scan completely like arbitrary parts of the room, and like sometimes it'll be interesting things like a computer log talking about the space pirates attempting to recreate Samus's weapons. And other times it's just a fucking rock, but it's but it's still like a rock that can tell you something about the place you're in.
Right. Okay, so I have a question. Have you played larger games like The Witcher 3 or Skyrim or any of the Dragon Ages where they have these codex things spread all over the world and like do you read every one of them? Are
I
you the
have
type of person who would read every codec entry?
Okay, here is the thing that like I have actually thought about this, and I've like considered maybe doing a video relating to it. I don't think that those are good ways to like distribute world building, because I I don't know the context in which like BioWare's developers want me to actually read the codex.
Mhm.
With Metroid Prime, I know how they want me to read these things. It's like, okay, you read about this like weird beetle, and then it gives you a couple paragraphs, but they are very easily read very quickly. And it's like, okay, I know you mean me to read these things immediately. With the codex, it's just like, what do you expect me to like find one the moment that it is first unlocked and then just like read this for a couple minutes? Or do you expect me to just like put aside an afternoon and just like go through the entire thing? I don't really like the codexes for that yeah, for those reasons, because it's not clear when I'm supposed to read them, and it's also not clear in many places like how much stock I'm supposed to put in them. Whereas like okay,
Mhm.
like the Mass Effect games, they don't really divulge anything particularly important in those codexes. Like those are interesting things if you want to know like who the Batarians are before they turn up, but then but yeah, they're not going to be like essential reading at any point. And then you've got other games like Final Fantasy 13. I actually like a lot of the Final
Mhm.
Fantasy 13 stuff, but the data log was terrible because it has actually important information that you have no idea is there unless you decide to go out of your way
Mm.
to just like put aside an afternoon and read it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I fully admit that I might even start out reading some of those things and then just ignore it for 90%
Hmm.
of the game. Yeah.
I think most people do, and like I mean, I think for a lot of games, like that's how they write the lore, as if like people aren't going to read them, and that's fine. But I think like it helps to have a context in which it makes sense for people to read them, and Metroid Prime does that in a way that a lot of later games that I've played that go hard on like lore and world building actually do.
Awesome. No, it's worth checking out then. I know I haven't
Yeah.
played a Metroid game since the first one. So,
Yeah. Well,
would I need to have any other previous Metroid experience before going into
absolutely
Prime?
not. And
Okay.
yeah, they remastered the first one on the Switch, and it's an absolutely gorgeous remaster. Uh, so it doesn't have any required information. You might like want to know who Ridley is, but other than that,
Okay. Awesome. How have video games impacted your social life and your relationships?
so most of my friends are quote video game friends. They are the people that I meet over video games, or people that I talk about video games with, and all that. But I mean, I do have like friends outside of that, and I think the big thing that it's sort of like impacted outside of just being the main focus of it is the Persona games sort of like taught me as a shitty teenager who didn't really like see a point in socializing, like what the actual value was, and like how to actually do it, which
Mhm.
helped me a lot because again, terrible teenager.
Hey, being a teen is hard.
Exactly,
Okay.
yes. And look, there are flaws with the Persona games. I think they are very good at depicting being a slightly terrible teenager who's like still at least doing their best.
Awesome. What's your favorite gaming platform and why?
So, in terms of like the platform that I do the most gaming on, that is like fairly obviously the PC. Although I
Mhm.
think that's almost like the boring answer, because like at this point the PC doesn't really have an identity as a gaming platform. It's just like the thing that everything is on.
Yeah.
Uh, like in terms of something a bit like more characterful, like I like the Nintendo Switch just as sort of like a form factor. I think that's a fantastic like way to play a lot of games, especially games that I tend to play, because like it's really good for like RPGs where you're going to be sitting there for like 50, 60 hours
Mhm.
doing a whole lot of not much. But then if I'm thinking about it in terms of what is my like what platform produced the most like games that I hold dear, it's actually the Game Boy Advance,
Oh, wow.
because that had like that had so many like really interesting games, or really interesting installments of long running series.
Mhm.
Like it had like the Minish Cap for Zelda. It had Metroid Fusion and Zero Mission. It had it had the Mega Man Battle Network series, which like I think is underrated, even though it is the best selling like Mega Man series. Um, but it also had like a lot of like ports of like Super Nintendo games that like I missed because my family went from the NES to the Nintendo 64. So it's like that's how I got introduced to Final Fantasy. That like I picked up
Mm.
the updated releases of like Final Fantasy 1 and 2.
Okay. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So
Also, yeah.
when did the Game Boy Advance come out? Was it between the first one and the color one, or was it after Game
It
Boy
was after
Color?
color. It
Okay.
was it was the best like scheduling that I can think of is like I think it came out like pretty like 2001 or so because like Sonic Adventure 2 hit the GameCube at around the same time that Sonic
Mm.
Advance hit the Game Boy Advance.
Okay, okay.
So it's like
I'm a little
around that
old. I do.
well,
Awesome.
there's a lot of things that I just like remember by vague ballpark.
Right, right. So it was after the color and before the DS and
Yes,
yeah, yeah,
exact.
okay.
It was definitely out by 2003 because that's when Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire happened.
Ah, there you go. Okay. Have you been able to find decent like reboots or copies of those games that you missed from the advance?
um, a lot of the stuff from that era that has like been really worth playing is like they've been like remastered or re-released. Like the Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection is
Mm.
out and is as good as you can hope given those games. Like Battle Network 4 is but like that's the game's fault. Um, but also it's like yeah the emulation stuff on that side is very good and like Nintendo Switch Online has like the Game Boy Advance stuff that like I think just yesterday it launched the Golden Sun games. So
Oh wow.
yeah, like that collection is not very big right now, but like it's got some of the stuff you really want.
I think it's good in a way that the companies are really catering to nostalgia right now because
Yeah,
there's nothing really you can think of that you're like, "Oh, I wanna play that again," that they haven't already thought of and are reproducing in some way.
yeah. Like I used to say that like the like in terms of like understanding the problems of video game preservation, the biggest example and like flashpoint was GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64 because
Mhm.
it was so hard to get a re-release to happen for so many reasons and because of that like a really seminal part of gaming history just like isn't easily attainable and then they actually managed to make that happen so I need to find another example for that.
What do you think about the 9 and the Tactics remakes that are rumored?
um I I will see what happens on the 9 remake. I don't think the 9 remake is necessarily needed because like the version that you can currently get on Steam and the Switch and other like current platforms, that is actually like very good. That's been like rebuilt in I think Unity and it and like it runs about as well as you'd hope. It's got all the flaws that you kind of almost want from it. It's like, look, PlayStation RPGs are very weird. Uh, Final Fantasy Tactics, I would really want to make
Mm.
to see a remaster of, and Tactics Ogre got remastered a few years ago, which
It
is
was
a very
amazing.
close cousin. And yeah,
No, I loved it because I started with Ogre Battle, and it is so true to both Tactics and Ogre Battle with the music and the
mm,
characters, and it is amazing. Sorry. How do you balance your time between playing video games and your other responsibilities or activities?
um, badly. I'm gonna say that right off the bat. Like I mostly manage it by like sort of very specific time boxing on like your average day of like okay this many hours is going to be spent on like this game and much on this other game and
Mhm.
like this much on my writing or video production but also it's like okay, I learned from Persona, no, you need to take a social opportunity whenever it happens, and I do that whenever it can, which is usually in like the political activism space. I've got a lot of politics nerd friends, so
Ah, okay. No, I mean, I think it's hard, and I know you've been putting together YouTube videos, and I know that takes a lot of time too.
yeah, it does, and like I always make sure to do at least 2 hours on either making a script for that or doing actual production work on that, and that gets a fair amount of that gets a fair amount of the way. And like sometimes you have to do extra work, some
Mhm.
mostly for like finding actual footage, because like for me a lot of that is like going through Final Fantasy 14 stuff and recording it actually in person, which can take a lot more extra time than if I'm doing, say, one of
Mm.
the occasional ones I've done on fighting games. And at that point, it's actually better for me to like jump on YouTube and find a good like footage of like competitive play.
Right. Can you share a favorite video game memory or experience that has had a lasting impact on you?
Okay, so a bit of a window for people. Before we did this, when you sent over the questions, I had a response of like there was one that I had an answer which I would like content warning with like medical grossness.
All right, we'll
This is
post
that
that.
one.
So anyone who needs to shut your ears.
Yeah, like take a few minutes for a bit. So to give a bit of context, because like you kind of need it for this one. I have what's called hydrocephalus, which is a sort of like disorder where the ventricles that get fluid in and out of the brain just straight up like aren't big enough in for me. It's like, look, as my parents have put it, my brain's literally too big. Um, but like because of that, it like causes major issues on like if the fluid can't get in, like that can't get well. If it can't get in, that's usually fine. If it can't get out, that causes huge problems. And because of that, I've got a shunt in, which is basically just a tube. Like there's more complicated medical stuff involved in there, but it's just a tube. Um, uh, and and so like that mostly does its work, but like the most common thing that goes wrong there is like a partial blockage. It's like it's not that the shunt is like completely incapable of getting a fluid in or out, but just like there's some sort of like partial obstruction or something that means that it can't get everything out. And what that usually means in my experience is that when I've got a partial blockage, I wake up feeling like absolute shit because I've been lying down and sort of like the fluid is built up over the night and it hasn't been able to get out. And then as I go about the day, it's like it like clears up over that. But when that happens, that's a sign to like go into hospital and get this stuff checked out. And usually that's relatively fine. It's like it's almost a hardware problem. Like you can take that, like you can just sort of like take it out and replace it, and that works fine. But sometimes it's caused by like a larger problem. And when I was like in my teenage years, it was caused by a larger problem that they weren't at first able to identify. And I remember that this was in specifically 2008 because it meant that I was in hospital for a very long amount of time in that era. So it's like I remember a lot of the Beijing Olympics. I
Oh,
remember a lot of Catherine Tate's season of Doctor Who, uh, and part of that was like I'm into video games and all that. So my family brought in like as much as would feasibly make any amount of sense. Which like I had my DS. So it was the fourth generation of Pokemon. Of course, I know that one at this point. uh, and they also brought in like the family MacBook with the only game that they could find that was actually like a serious game that also ran on the Mac, which was Heroes of Might and Magic 5.
mm,
And at one point during that hospital stay, uh, like, okay, sometimes I did have the partial blockages, but that was mostly eased by like being in a bed that could like sit up.
Yeah.
Uh, but at one point, and this is the only time it has ever happened in my life, there was instead a full block, which caused entirely different problems. And it was essentially entirely flipped. Whereas instead of waking up feeling terrible and then doing better later as the day goes, I got worse as the day went. And the problem there is like, okay, that was obviously a bad sign when we recognized that's what was going on.
Mhm.
But it was hard to tell because like you're in hospital, you feel like shit anyway.
Yeah.
Like just the entire environment is not designed to like make you feel good, which is like that's not the hospital's fault. It's just a really sad
Mhm.
place to be. Uh, so like I was getting worse over time, and like I couldn't like no one could really quite tell, including myself, until I was like playing that Heroes 5, and at some point in the afternoon, like you might realize that's like a turn-based strategy game that requires a fair amount of thinking. And
Mhm.
eventually I realized that I was not actually capable of doing the math that I knew that I should be reasonably capable of doing. And that was the red flag showing like, okay, something's gone wrong. We need to take them into surgery. Uh,
Wow.
and I genuinely credit that game with me surviving that day, because any other thing I could have been doing on that day, including any other game that I could have been playing, would not have been engaging enough for me to realize it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it saved your life.
Yes, it did. And I am a little disappointed that like I got into that sort of thing after strategy games sort of like quietened down as
Mm.
an overall genre, because like I sort of owe it to him, but no, it turns out the Heroes franchise kind of petered out after that.
Aw. Well, it got one last hurrah in. So do you often have very bad headaches or?
um Yeah. Well, when there is a partial blockage, the main thing is just like the mother of all headaches. But
Mhm.
I also get like stress migraines anyway, so
Right.
it's like whenever a headache hits, it's just like, oh, okay, is this something I need to be wary of, or is this just like life being terrible? And so it's like usually I have to like wait for one of the other symptoms to kick in, which is usually vomiting. But
Right.
yeah,
Aw. No, it's hard, I'm sorry.
it's no, it's fine, and it rarely actually kicks in. Like it's usually like once every 10 years or so. It's like the shunt like degrades enough that
Mhm.
like partial blockages start happening. So it's like it's a very rarely like occurring thing, and it's also like usually very easily fixed. Although there are yeah, it's prone to some like extra problems happening, which happened then.
Right. Awesome. Do you think video games can be used as an effective tool for education or personal development?
I think they absolutely can. You can just like point to the Oregon Trail as like evidence of that.
We all know that one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I am in Australia. I have never played Oregon Trail. I don't even have a full grasp of what the Oregon Trail is, and I still know the Oregon Trail. Uh, but I think that the games that are really, really good at those things, like I think the like when people think about this sort of question, they think about like games that are like deliberately educational, and that is the primary thing. And like, look, those have their place. I think that the games that are the best at this are instead the games that like teach fairly complicated things and do so like very indirectly. Like there is a good amount of world history that I know that can be attributed to the Civilization games, or
Mhm.
a bit more helpfully, like City Skylines like has taught me more about like the actual concepts of like city management and all of that than I would ever have learned in my life, because like that subject is usually like a university level thing. And so it's like people generally don't learn that stuff, but a video game can like teach it to them in a way that they don't necessarily notice.
They don't know they're learning. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's definitely untapped, and I would love to see video games take more of a prominent focus going forward in education.
It is, although I also like am a bit conscious that like again, I think the games that do the best at that are the ones that sort of like do it indirectly and almost unintentionally. I think like if you made a game explicitly to like be educational, specifically towards like an elementary or high school audience, I don't think it would necessarily work.
Yeah.
Like I think it needs to be like game first, educational tool second, and that's actually a very difficult thing to put forward in this sort of concept.
Yeah. No, for sure. Can you name a game that has impacted or influenced you the most in life?
That would be City of Heroes. It was not the first MMO I played. That would have been like Maple Story, RuneScape, the cheap ones that like
Mhm.
kids in the 2000s picked up because like it was a thing you could play for no money. City of Heroes was the first like quote unquote serious MMO I ever played, and well, not only was it the first time I sort of like explored gender identity, and it was like not particularly intentionally. It was just like eventually I had to realize, hey, why am I never managing to make a male character? And like maybe there's reasons for that, but also it's when I first got into like role playing on online, and that got me into actually writing, which I'd never really sort of like considered as like a thing I might enjoy doing before then. And so I was like, yeah, a lot of what I am now can be traced back to that. Like, I'm going to be honest, maybe 7 out of 10 MMO from 2004.
Hey, no, you know what? A lot of my friends were playing it back then.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
look,
it was popular.
it was popular for like a non World of Warcraft MMO at the time, which is like still a lot, and it had a lot of uh, interesting like smaller ideas on how to make a game like that that I think even now a lot of games fail to really like learn from. I think one of the things that I really noticed, like when that game shut down, and I was like looking into other MMOs, is that no other MMO sort of like was as good at understanding like difficulty curves as City of Heroes, because
Mm.
like MMOs sort of like by nature like go all over the goddamn place in terms of like player power level.
Yeah.
Just because you've got to have a lot of different people filling a lot of different roles, and sometimes those get a little weird. Uh, and the way that City of Heroes did that, at least after a point, was like there was like an NPC that you could talk to and say like, okay, when you're doing like content solo, and that's another thing actually. It was one of the first MMOs that was like actually good at letting you be solo in like serious content.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, it was able to ask you like, okay, do you want your missions to be like how many levels above or below your character's actual level, or how many like how many people do you want your one character to like count as in terms of like the enemy spawning algorithm.
Mm.
So it's like if you are really balling against like this specific type of enemy, like you can just say, oh no, I count as 8 people, and then you can just go like careening through and just making a massive pile of bodies. uh,
Mm.
yeah, it was really good at a lot of really subtle things. So yeah, it's very it's very seminal in a lot of ways, not just in personal ways, but for yeah.
I feel now like I kind of missed out. Like I was playing EverQuest back at that time getting kicked by snakes. So
I
I
mean,
feel like that may have been the superior MMO.
I look, it's all like up to what you want out of a thing. And I will say, like only a few days ago, like the like private server that's been kicking around for City of Heroes finally got like legal permission to exist. So you can go and play that now if you want.
Are you kidding? I don't have time. I'm trying to get all my triple triad cards.
No, I'm the same. I love that game. I don't really have a place in my life for it anymore, as much as I wish I did.
Right. Do you think video games should be used to address social or political issues?
I think they absolutely should. I think a lot of them do, even if it's not especially clear, like how in a lot of places. And I think that one of the greatest disappointments that you can get from a game is like when it gets close to saying something but doesn't. And
Mm.
like, look, that's a very common thing that that people say about like Persona 5, where it's like it was very close to having a lot of like very interesting like social things to say about like the place of like sort of like the relationship between like teenagers and adults and like that power dynamic, and then it just never actually like put its foot down and said anything. But also, I don't think it's actually very hard to make a point. It just might not be especially clear. Like we both play Final Fantasy 14. That
Mhm.
game is fantastic at doing all of those things in ways that are often a bit subtle, but maybe and like maybe people don't quite pick it up. But it's very clearly got like messages that it wants to convey and issues that it holds dear. Granted, for an international audience, a lot of that is lost because a lot of it is actually like stemming from like Japanese political history,
Right.
which like, is interesting to learn about. But it will mean that things are a bit lost on you when you do, for example, the samurai quest line.
Mm. No, that's really true. Do you think it's almost easier to address some of these issues in a video game format as opposed to just coming right out and saying something or using real world examples?
I I think in some places it's sort of helpful to have a distinctly unreal example because like a real example would be too difficult to engross people in.
Mm.
Uh, uh, I can't think of any particular examples right now, but
Mhm.
uh, yeah, I actually like. There's a lot of things in like the like the the Garlean parts of Final Fantasy 14 that has a lot of like intricate parts about like how people handle like in war and where they like exist in that sort of like state in the world, and like what happens afterwards and all that. And like that stuff is sort of like really hard to get across to people who especially might not be outright looking for that sort of media, because like I think media about actual wars have like very particular like aesthetics and directions and like appeal to a very specific kind of
Mhm.
person. If you want to tell that story to someone who's outside of that crowd, I think you need to get a bit fantastical, and then you create a situation like the Bosnia storyline, which I absolutely love.
Mm.
Uh, but it's very much like it's like talking about war stories in ways that you don't necessarily get from a lot of the upfront war stories.
Right. Well, I mean, making that comparison between war stories and the Garlean Empire in EndWalker, some of those EndWalker scenes in Garlean territory were very shocking,
They were,
like very
yeah,
very shocking and
it
very
was.
very cutting edge. Was that intentional?
I I absolutely think that was intentional, and to the
Mhm.
point where like, look, I've done a video on like sort of the political rundown of like Final Fantasy 14's nations, and I went hard on Garlemald to the point where that got an entire separate video. Uh, there's a lot of like vague political allusions around Garlemald, where it's like you can tell that the actual aesthetic of the zone is like based on the Battle of Stalingrad. Like once you actually like compare those pictures, it's like, oh yeah, that's how they got like how those buildings have fallen and all of that.
Mm.
Whereas and like the yeah, like the actual like perspectives of characters like Quintus and Julius, those have roots in a lot of like real world conflict, although very rarely specifically in any one real world conflict, which I think is a smart view, because it's like it's
Right.
talking about war as an abstract rather than this war specifically, and I think that can in many ways be a lot stronger.
Right. Yeah, no, I do still remember some scenes very, very clearly in my mind
Oh,
from
you can
going
say
through
it was
that.
Quintus's second scene. We
Oh,
all know
no.
that.
And when you go trying to find, the woman who had run off, like, there are
Yeah,
scenes like those that are just yeah.
yeah, that was absolutely amazing, and I would say like I am very like fairly active around the sort of Final Fantasy 14 like communities environment. I think it's really noteworthy that Garlemald, like in Endwalker, is one of the few places where like not only do I see people like not misunderstand it at all. Like, okay, there's still some people that don't, but like, there's definitely some people that, like, for the most part, like, people understand what they were putting down, and people understand like the things that people wish went differently is like more clearly and self-awarely wish fulfillment rather than uh like thinking it should have gone down differently.
Mhm.
And also, I think it's the only part of the game that I think people like wish was longer rather than shorter.
Right. No, because it was so emotionally invested. Now
Yeah,
I don't wanna give specific spoilers, but, that whole arc kind of ends with Xenos doing something to our body, that was
yeah.
very shocking to a lot of people, and they ended up having very strong emotions, like, I felt very strongly
Mm.
about it. Do you think maybe what he did goes way too far? Like, was there
I
a line crossed? Like, it feels like abuse, like,
I think it
you're taken advantage of.
I think it really is, and it like I honestly think like I do like thinking about a lot of things in terms of like the like intentions of the author. I My theory, and it is like entirely supposition, is that look, we know that the Garlemald part of the story went through a lot of like consideration, because like they knew they were going to be doing that for a very long time, and it was
Mhm,
going to be like a whole expansion by itself before like they realized that it was just better to do it and the like the next expansion all at the same time. I think what the intention for that one was is that that quest was always on the table and was intended to be like much more affecting to the overall story and the characters within it than it ended up being. And just like over the course of rewrites, like the aftermath and the response like got cut down, but the quest itself never got taken away or like removed or reduced, because it's just such a strong quest in and of itself.
mhm.
So it's like you couldn't cut that, but they unfortunately like I think cut the like responses to it, and so it's like I think a lot of people who like come away from Endwalker being like like very anti Xenos on like a much deeper level, like are people that take that quest a lot more seriously than the game
Right.
does, which I think is fair enough, because again I think the game like sort of moves on from that a lot easier than it probably should. And yeah, I suspect that might have been like a result of rewrites.
Fair. Or they have some really, really good therapy in Eorzea. Like, I don't know which, but,
No, I think the role quests make it very clear that there are no good therapists in Eorzea.
uh, I mean, is the Warrior of Light, sociopathic? Do you think
No,
that they're no?
absolutely.
Okay.
I think that the fun like a fundamental part of Final Fantasy XIV's air writing is the Warrior of Light is a good person. Like, they might have at times made difficult decisions. They might like going to like the Dark Knight quest line that everyone loves except me.
Right.
Uh, like like they might like really have some like heavy turmoil about what they've done, or like feel like they're being taken advantage of by like having to constantly do all these things, but they will always do them because they are always like fundamentally a good person at the end of the day.
Do you think that's why there's such a hard line when we talk about additional classes being added, like necromancer and very clearly evil
Yes,
vocations? Yeah.
absolutely. And I think I think a lot of people who like want necromancer, like they point at like Dark Knight and Reaper as like, but those are evil classes. I don't think they actually played those classes, because they are Batman kind of thing, or like maybe Spawn in the case of Reaper, where it's like, okay, the means are a bit shady, but it's it's a gray leading to a good, whereas like necromancy is like there's no way to do a good necromancy. That's not actually possible. That
Just put a bow on the corpse. Yeah, no,
that's
it doesn't work that way.
exactly. It's like not that's like not something we do. Like, look, all of Earth has like different relationships with death, but they all generally respect the dead.
Okay. So you think, kind of the Reaper direction, the Dark Knight is kind of as far in that direction as they're going to lean.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if you're sitting down to listen to a game's soundtrack, which one is it?
Okay, so I actually very rarely like listen to music voluntarily. I'm much more into
Mhm.
like podcasts if I'm going to be like putting on something to listen to. But if I am putting on one, it is either Final Fantasy 14, which is like a little bit obvious and a little bit basic, is either Guilty Gear Strive, which yeah, hold on, where there's the hand. Yeah. Look, it's that's fairly those are really good songs. Or in a weird sense, it is like Pokemon, because like I
Mhm.
think I think Pokemon's developers realized very quickly that in a turn-based RPG that isn't necessarily very visually flashy, music is the main way you've got to like set a tone, set a pace, and set a feel. So they have just been going hard since like the Game Boy Advance.
Right. Yeah, no, and it's really uplifting. Like, there
Yeah.
aren't a lot of incredibly depressing Pokemon songs.
I I mean, the anime is the one that gets into like depressing Pokemon songs, where it's like the games like they don't really like have the capacity to go into that
Right.
space.
I don't
The
know,
closest,
Cubone is tragic.
I mean, yeah, like they go spooky. They don't go like
Mm,
sad.
yeah. Okay. What game mechanic would you like to see more of in the future? I know
This is
this is
gonna
kind of
sound
vague.
this is gonna sound weird. Complicated romantic relationships, because like I think a lot of game like when games like do romance as like something that has some sort of like mechanic or gameplay or like player choice around it, they get way too heavy on like wish fulfillment.
Mm.
And like I'm looking at you, Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, yeah,
Um
yeah.
whereas like I'll say like if a game just like does romance and it's like you don't get any input, that's usually fantastic. The Xenoblade games are really good for that. But I think the thing that I want the games to really get into is like relationships that are actually like more complicated than a lot of games really put forward. And I think Persona 4 had some really good examples for that, because it really leaned into the fact that, you know, teenagers are a little bit crap. They aren't very good. They aren't very good at this. So it's like there is one character where like if you enter into a relationship with them early on, like it goes badly and you break up and just remain friends. And then there's another character where it's where like you have to like to actually engage in a romantic relationship with them, you have to pick a number of dialogue options that are just objectively awful things to be saying. Where it's like this is like it's because like she just isn't like in a position to like consider you that, and like the entire relationship, when if you actually do go into that, like that's clearly not a relationship that's going to work in the short or long term. But it's sort of like you can put yourself into a position where they try and it doesn't look like it's going great. So
Uh,
I want more games to do like weird stuff like that.
okay. So do you think that maybe developers might be shying away from that? Like the audience might in general be afraid of not getting a relationship thereafter in the fantasy game they're playing?
I don't think it's necessarily afraid so much as just like both the players and the developers approach it from a perspective of like crowd pleasing. Like to
Hmm.
the developers, okay, you want to like be able to have sex with Karlak because of course you do. So of course you're going to let them do that, and then all the players are like, oh yeah, obviously I'm going to do that. And where it's like, yeah, I want developers to instead put forward like, okay, if you really want this, it's not going to be easy, and it's also like maybe not a good idea. Like, and I think out of all of like Baldur's Gate 3 is really the elephant in the room on this one. It's like
Mhm.
Asterion almost goes for some of this, but not really in a way that's all that interesting. It's like that's all fundamentally wish fulfillment. It's just different kinds of wishes being fulfilled. Whereas like, no, I want things to actually get ugly, or for like some relationships to like actually be impossible based on what you're doing. Like Shadowheart is a religious girl. Like it should, like whether or not she actually like enters into a relationship with you, should be heavily based on like how you act in accordance with like her personal religious views.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's funny because I just played the Tiefling party scene on stream today. It's like my 6th playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3. I've put thousands of hours into this thing already, but for this particular playthrough, I decided to talk to Shadowheart, in fact. And I had the wine date with her. I don't
Hmm.
want to spoil too much. We had a kiss, and in the very next scene, she started talking about courtship. And I had already, been derogatory to her towards her goddess. So,
Hmm.
it is a little low bar,
Yeah.
I think.
I
Yeah.
I have a very negative experiences on Baldur's Gate 3's general romantic relationships, and it is largely related to that party scene and that scene in particular. Because, like, first of all, I went with Shadowheart not because I actually like I didn't even know that was going to be a romantic scene. I just thought, people share
Yeah.
bottles of wine. That's normal. Apparently, it's not. Like, but also it's like the game bugged out and also decided that I like shacked up with Halcyon that night.
Oh, what? I didn't even know that was possible.
Neither did I.
Oh.
but, but it's like, yeah, the game just like acted out like the next time I was at camp and talking to him. It was like I had these dialogue options saying like acting like I did something with him that I very objectively did not, and so it's just like, oh, that's like, no, like Baldur's Gate 3 is so horny that it will break itself to get hornier, and I hate that.
So I don't wanna infringe on later questions, but do you think, AI might play a role in these future complicated romantic
I
relationships?
hope not.
To kind of keep the play something unpredictable.
I No, I don't think that's a good. I don't think that's a good use for AI, or it's a good way to direct it. Like, okay, let's talk about Baldur's Gate 3 and like figure out okay, how should those characters actually like be responding aside from like you talk to them enough so now they want to bone you? Like, okay, we said like Shadowheart wants you like religious, so should probably be like having that as a major factor. And it's like Asterion, I don't know. I kicked him out of my party. Look, he attempted to attack me. I'm not
You're
going to
not
keep him around.
you're not wrong.
But then, yeah, it's like Gale. I think Gale is inherently a very selfish,
Oh, yeah.
person in terms of like relationships. So it's like I think that he, I think that if you wanted to add like a hard mode to that one, it's like yes, he could, he's probably going to be like willing to enter into a relationship. It's not going to be a healthy one, like
Mhm.
especially not for you. And then there's like Lazel. I think it's like Lazel would deliberately want to keep things physical and like not want to think about things any further than that, basically ever. And so it's like maybe like the relationship there would only happen if you didn't have sex with her.
Mm.
And then it's like, Will, no, Will I think is a good person who was probably like who would probably like be fairly fairly honest and fairly upfront about all this, although like he's got his own like hotbed of issues.
Just a little,
Like,
yeah.
look, like you can enter into that relationship like no problem, and he's going to be very open, but like you're gonna have some like difficult nights. And yeah, Karlak is actually a very upfront person as well, so it's like I feel like Karlak can actually stay as is.
Okay.
Look,
That one works.
if you're wanting to to like complicate all of these things, it makes sense that maybe one of these people is actually just like very uncomplicated and very willing to like enter into a relationship. And I think that's Karlak. I don't think Karlak is an internally very complicated person.
Mhm. Yeah. No, that's incredibly fair. Okay. Uh, which upcoming gaming technology are you most excited about?
Okay, so for the most part with game with like technology, I'm sort of like I'm only interested when you give me something that actually interests me about it. Like to this day, I still haven't seen like a use of VR that's actually all that
Mm.
like appealing to me. Because well, I mean, the games that are good for VR just like aren't actually very interesting to me personally. Like, look, you're not going to be able to give me like a strategic RPG in VR, but
Yeah.
in thinking about this, I had like a weird realization. Like, I think it might actually be like pronoun choice. It's like that's a thing that's come up like modestly recently. It's like I think the first one that the first game outside of like the heavy indie scene that really went into that was like I think it was BattleTech, and then like later on other games have like started using it like Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield, and granted Starfield didn't do a whole lot else right, and even that didn't actually keep to the pronoun choices. But I think like that's a good sign of like I want to see that in more games,
Mhm.
and I also want to see like more exploration of like what like character choices like that can actually do in terms of like okay, these are things relating to like character presentation and identification that like we used to sort of take for granted. So it's like now that we've got character pronoun choice, what other things can we like put forward in that sort of same vein, and where does that go?
Right. So just I think that is something that Baldur's Gate got right is the
Yeah.
extent of customization. Is really unparalleled. Like I think the only other game where you can customize so much is maybe like Sims 4. In
Yeah,
terms of
actually, I do remember seeing that The Sims 4 had a lot of really good options for that.
Mm.
I was genuinely very surprised when I was going through the Baldur's Gate 3 character creation and saw that like Vitiligo is in like
Yes,
the
yeah.
first page. Like not even in like the weird like more options stuff. It's just like, oh, that's a really interesting. And I think those sorts of things are actually a lot more interesting to me than how a lot of the character creation stuff used to work, which was like nose brow width. It's
Right,
like
right. Yeah,
no, no
yeah.
one no one goes hard on those on like those sliders unless they are
Mhm.
making Monster Factory. But like I think people like are faced with interesting questions and all that, and can identify a lot stronger when like we are putting in more like unusual forms of like identification and presentation that aren't often very well like represented.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really awesome point. Thank you. Have you kept any old games or consoles, just purely out of nostalgia?
So when I moved to Melbourne, like a number of years ago, at this point, I left a lot of that I left a lot of that at home because, like, I was moving that I was moving across states, and like in Australia, moving across states, that's a lot bigger. Like
Mhm.
you're probably picturing a lot much smaller states. The distance that I went was more along the lines of like moving from Texas to California.
Yeah, I'm Canadian, so I understand large
Yeah,
spaces.
but yeah, like there
Yeah.
was one exception. There was one exception.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you did. You managed to save something.
I found the one thing that like fit in my suitcases that I wanted to have like in my apartment. Uh, yeah, I do like to have like some physical games around when possible, and like yeah, when Metroid Prime Remastered got announced, like I specifically made a point get the physical version because I want to like have physical evidence that that happened. But yeah, when it's the City of Villains box.
Awesome. What game do you wish you could experience again for the very first time?
Okay, I want to let you in on like the like thought process that I went through when thinking about this, because I didn't actually like think about this in terms of like story, because for me the stories that hit me the heaviest hit me because of like where I was in my life.
Mhm.
And and so like I don't really want to do those. But then I thought about it, and it's like there is one situation where I sort of go through this, and it's like whenever a new Pokemon generation comes out, I specifically like do as little research as possible outside of like what are the version exclusives, so I know that I'm happy with what I get. Uh, and also like I only ever use Pokemon that I have never used before, which is mostly the new ones.
Right.
So every time it is basically like playing a Pokemon game for the first time, and like I think that's really interesting. It's like playing like a heavy RPG for the first time. For the first time is sort of like figuring out a puzzle. So I feel like my answer to this might be like one of the Bravely games, Bravely Default, Default
Right.
2, Bravely Second,
Mhm.
because those are like spiritual successors to Final Fantasy V. They have a lot of like tiny little moving parts, and it's just sort of like, okay, what if I take this skill from Samurai and this skill from Ninja, like put them on the same character and see what happens? And and those go like really well and have a lot of like interesting interactions. I would love to just like go through all of those again. And as an added bonus, like the sequels to Bravely Default do some really interesting things with like playing with like sort of their mechanical knowledge of themselves as like a storytelling element. So there's some fun stuff there. Like Bravely Default 2 has like a major story twist come from like the presentation of its menus.
Right. Wow. I unfortunately I haven't got to play any of the Bravely Defaults, though I do have number 2, I think, for the DS, but
Okay, I was going to ask which number 2 because there's Bravely Second and then there's Bravely Default 2, which is the third one.
Oh, wow.
It's
Okay.
a little weird where it's like Bravely Second was like a direct sequel to Bravely Default. And then for Bravely Default 2, they decided like, okay, we don't want to like follow up on that sort of sequel,
Mm,
and we're going to do like sort of the Final Fantasy thing of like same general concepts and like toolkits and settings, but like in an entirely new world with entirely new situations, which I think is kind of smart because like I think direct sequels to RPGs have a weird problem of like escalation. Like
yeah.
how do you build up from like basically killing God? What is the next thing you do there?
No, exactly, and that was a big conversation, about 7.0 after the events of
Yes,
EndWalker, and it's like,
I think
"Okay,
they're
well, we
answering that very
saved the
well.
universe, now what do we do?"
And we go
So
on vacation.
it's
Which
there has to be a de-escalation because you can't keep, getting a bigger hammer.
exactly,
Yeah.
and yeah, I am really looking forward to a lot of the Dawn Trail stuff going forward, and I think that they have made exactly the right call on that one because like it brings things down far enough that they can build up again if they want in the if in the future. Whereas like if they like went to another shard and that was the entire expansion, no, that's the new floor.
Yeah.
That's that's the new thing that you can only go down to. Whereas like, okay, this one is like Heaven's Ward scale, and so it's like that's the new bottom.
Yeah. Sorry. Are there any game companies you think are doing great work for the community?
So when I was thinking about this, I'm thinking in terms of like what games companies like interact best with their communities, and I think
Mhm.
a very strong example to put forward is like a lot of like fighting game developers. Like they do a lot of like a really good like engagement with the player base and like both like making sure that the like players get what they want, but also like celebrating what they're doing and like they do that really well in ways that very few other like developers and genres can even do. It's like debatably
Mhm.
Pokemon does that, uh, but in other spaces, I think I actually wish that I was more into this game than I am because Digital Extremes and Warframe is like
Wow.
I think that is the I think they're the gold standard for like both how like a live service game should function, but also like how a the developers of a live service game like should interact with their like with their player base and like yeah should work with that. And I don't think it's that unsurprising that like Final Fantasy XIV's approach isn't that dissimilar. Although I think it was sort of like parallel evolution rather than like directly taking notes.
Right. What changes do you hope to see in the gaming industry in the next 5 years?
Okay. Hope is an interesting one because I'm going to be honest, I expect that we are going to see a bit of a crash in like the AAA like gaming space over
Mm,
time. Like they are getting too big and eventually things are going to like hit a breaking point and I think debatably they may already be hitting it. Uh, and so the question is more like when that happens, I think the question is then what happens next. And I think like the indie space gets to like build up and like try to do new things, hopefully. But I think the other thing that will happen is that when every other like major developer and publisher like crashes, everyone's going to look at the fact that Nintendo didn't because like Nintendo hasn't like gone for a lot of the like ballooning costs and a lot and like
mm,
productions and graphical values. Like they are very content making much the same games that they've always been making, which like to a degree is a bit of a negative. But I think once once everyone else becomes unsustainable and they don't, I think it then start we then start to look at it and it's like, oh, okay, maybe we should start taking notes from that.
mhm. And I mean, indie creators have done a lot for fan service. Like, I can't tell you the last Harvest Moon I've played, but I have played Stardew Valley and absolutely loved it. And that was done by one person.
Yeah,
So do you think there's a lot of opportunity out there for things like that?
I I think there will be. I think it's going to be a little interesting where it's like it's not necessarily that that like indie developers will like deliberately like step up to fill the void, but rather that like once like Call of Duty falls over, once like there's like no longer any like any other remakes of The Last of Us Part One, um, then then people are going to start looking at the like more unusual things or like more in-depth throwback things that the indie developers have been making just this entire time, and like start like trying to embrace where they actually are more than seeing indie developers like deliberately step up to like make the next Call of Duty.
Right. But I mean, is that proof that people are more interested in a good story and a good game in terms of features and an ability to play it compared to all the like cinematic graphics, voice acting? Like, could you tell a really good story and make a great game with a very low budget?
I think you really can. I think a lot of games really have, and
Mhm.
I think when that inevitable collapse happens, look, there's going to be a lot of people who like were there for like Insomniac Spider-Man games entirely for the spectacle, and like those people aren't going to be satisfied anymore, and like they can go off and find other new happinesses in their life. But I think like when a question is more like, okay, what fills the void of like The Last of Us? I think like an indie space is going to be able to fill that.
Mm.
And although I think it's going to fill it in like a very different way. We're not going to see like another The Last of Us, but we might see like a new Undertale.
Right, right. Okay. Hey, we could go back to 8-bit. Octopath. I really enjoyed the
I
Octopath
love
games.
I played the first one that was like really good, although it's like then it went through like, okay, do this really unreasonably difficult boss rush to get the true ending. I was like, I'm not gonna do that. I I understand like Octopath Traveler 2 is apparently a hell of a lot better, and I just like haven't found a space in my life to approach
Right.
it.
Are there any upcoming game releases that you're particularly excited about?
Um so I'm currently in the state of like the of like look after 2023, like a lot of the games that were really hype for new and interesting reasons have kind of already happened.
Mhm.
So at this point, the big ones are like, hold on, let me pull up the actual list that I put forward here. Like it's Dawn Trail,
Yeah.
it is the Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake,
Mm.
and it is Metroid Prime 4 whenever that happens. Because at a certain point, it's like the thing that you really want is just more of the thing that you already know that you like. And like in the same way, like, I want to see what Street Fighter 6 does in the new year, because like I really liked that, but I sort of like got a bit like tired of it after doing the world tour mode, and like I want to try out some like new characters, but I want to like wait for there to be a bit more ground to stand on before then.
It's a strange dichotomy because I feel that too. It's like I want more of the franchises I really enjoy, but at the same time I complain that I haven't had anything brand new and groundbreaking to fall in love with for the first time. So we kind of both want innovation and
Hmm.
nostalgia at the same time.
Yeah, I look, when something new comes out that I'm like genuinely interested in, I will keep my eyes on it. And like there's some stuff that I've got my eyes on that's like they've come out like in the last few months that it's like, okay, you're on my radar now, but unfortunately, like I wasn't keeping track when you were coming out. Uh, but yeah, when it's like in terms of like the games that are coming out like in the future, like right now, the ones on the radar are just like the stuff that I already know I like. And like, look, there's gonna be other games that appeal in interesting ways. They just haven't turned up yet.
No, exactly. Okay, so speaking of new and innovative, if you could magically create your own game, what would it be about?
I I sort of come at this more from a like conceptual and abstract view. As like I don't necessarily have a story that I'd want to tell, but I know like the sort of thing I'd like the sort of story I'd want to tell. And the thing that I would want to tell is like the kind of horror game that actually like appeals to the things I like about horror, because I actually only found out that I like horror relatively recently, because my favorite like medium of entertainment has only ever gravitated to like forms of horror that I don't really like enjoy, or like I'm not I'm not really into gore. I don't like jump scares at all, so that like knocks out most of them. But like I'd want to make one that is like in a we like in like sort of like the subgenre of horror that I term as like Doctor Who horror. It's like the sort of story that like Doctor Who does when it like wants to be scary but still has to be like PG.
Right.
And it's like which they do really well at that in terms of like coming up with like really conceptual and unusual stories that like are really scary but like aren't visceral in like a visual sense. And I want games that are more like that. So if I were going to like magically produce my own game, it would be in that sort of vague space.
Okay. So it's not something that gives you nightmares, but it's something that makes you question your entire life.
No, it also gives you nightmares. It's just
Okay.
like different sorts of nightmares. I don't know. Have
Okay.
you seen like revival Doctor Who try to do horror? It's terrifying. It's
I've heard
terrifying.
of
It's just
some
not great.
scary games, like psychological horror, I guess,
Yeah,
is kind of the genre, yeah.
yeah, but also like, a lot of those are still like going in for jump scares, and I don't,
Mm,
and like I'm not into that. Like I feel like the best tool in the toolbox is dread, and you don't know, and like so many horror games like don't use that as well as they should. Like it's gonna sound really weird. I think one of the best horror games in recent times is Gone Home, which is not a horror game, but it uses all of these like aesthetic trappings to like make you terrified of every time you like turn a new corner and find a new thing. It's like no, this story has to go bad sometime, and so like yeah, the actual vibe of the entire thing like carries it so much more than the story actually does.
wow. See, I don't know if I could do it. My hand would never leave the save button. Like, I
It
just
exactly like I want a game that like makes you like constantly like makes you scared of doing anything
Mhm,
of doing all of these things, but not because it's going to jump scare you.
mhm. Okay. How do you think AI will change gaming in the future?
Um, Probably quite badly. So I think that there are like places for like generative AI and like machine learning, and I think we're going to have to like call it machine learning in the context of talking about video games, because video games already have a concept of AI, and like I don't think anyone would call like the level 9 Ganondorf CPU and Smash Brothers Melee an AI in
Right.
like the same way we call ChatGPT one. Uh, but yeah, like I think there are really good places for machine learning, and like I'm involved in like politics and all that, and I've heard some interesting like uses for it on like political and legal perspectives, where it's like, okay, I need to produce a lot of like very functional text. I don't like the fact that the text is written by a human is like the least important part of it. So if we can get so if we can like produce like a machine learning tool that can like generate like legal briefs or like first drafts of like political legislation uh, without having without first needing like a human to take all that time to write it, that has some real value. I don't think that any of the people currently pushing machine learning tools actually want to do any of that. They want to like use it to replace a creative process, which is the last thing anyone wants. And I think sort of at this point, they're sort of going to have to go through like the same backfire that they did with NFTs. Someone's going to have to make a game like largely built using like generative AI and machine learning, and it's going to have to blow up in their face as they realize people don't actually want it.
Right. Right. No, that's a really good point. So, I mean, you can kind of think, well, wouldn't it be amazing if there was a giant RPG where the possibilities for dialogue choices were indeed infinite, and the only way you could
Um,
get that was with AI. But
um,
then the nitty gritty is that, do you really want that? Do you really
Also,
want that?
I definitely know I don't want that, because the thing I want from stories is like intention. I want like I want a writer that knows what they're actually talking about and what they want to
Mhm.
say. And AI doesn't even know what it's talking about as it's saying it. So,
No, you're
because like
right. You're right.
exactly like I don't want an NPC that like has infinite unique dialogue choices based on whatever I do. I want one that has 6 dialogue choices, but they're all very well considered.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. So it could just be a matter of you're right. Be careful what you wish for, and will it perform as well in reality as people are thinking it will? So
I genuinely don't think it will, because again, I feel like someone's gonna try and it's not gonna work.
mm. Awesome. No, I would take that bet. So how many years out do you think something like that would be?
I don't know, because like I feel like someone has to like do the first earnest attempt within like the next year or two. Whether or not that will be the a fully like constructed attempt, I don't know. But like, I feel like the first person that tries to do like the big effort is the one that's going to fail hard enough that everyone reconsiders,
Right.
or everyone will get bored of AI and no one will do anything.
Right. Yeah, it could just move on. It could. Okay. And if you could recommend everyone on Earth play one game, which would it be and why?
Okay, so I want to introduce you to the thought process that I had when thinking about this one, because like you give me a hypothetical like this, I go into specifics. Because I started thinking, okay, if we are going to somehow make everyone on Earth play a single game, we are going to have to like somehow solve a whole lot of like user experience problems with this one game. It's like, let's just assume that we can do magic, and that we can assume that everyone is capable both on a physical level, on like a language level, and on like a general skill level of playing this game generally pretty well. And like that actually brings in options that I wouldn't usually have. Where it's like, I love Metal Gear. I would like recommend a lot more people play it if
Mhm.
it didn't control like the weirdest thing I've ever played. Uh, but I also didn't really want to go for that, because I thought, okay, if everyone is going to be playing one game, I want it to be like a game with a universal experience, and like a universal thing that it can tell people.
Right.
And I also want it to be like something that actually uses the medium of video games to do something that that other mediums kind of can't. So it's like Undertale was at first on the table, and then I had to take Undertale off the table because I realized that Undertale's entire message is like deeply ingrained in the fact that it is a video game in general and an RPG in particular. So it's like if I gave Undertale to my mum, she wouldn't really like get anything meaningful out of it because like she doesn't have the like ingrained vocabulary and assumed like standard procedure for those sorts of games that Undertale then questions.
Mhm.
So yeah, it has to be a game that that like has something to say to sort of like anyone. And at first I thought of like Fallout New Vegas, and then I realized no, Fallout New Vegas is Fallout New Vegas is the diet option for that in this day and age, because the real option is Disco Elysium. Because like Disco Elysium does so much to tell you to like really like force you to like think about decisions that you wouldn't necessarily make, and then like actually tell you things about yourself. And there are so many people like very confused why the game is calling them a fascist because it turns out they have not really thought about those sorts of things.
Wow. Okay, you put a lot of thought into this one.
I actually put even more thought into it because I have some backup choices. Because I also thought like, okay, that's sort of an interesting vein of what what are games that like forced you to like question things that you don't normally think of.
Mhm.
And then I had two games that take different directions towards a question that I think a lot of people do need to think about, which is like how much of you being the good person that you presumably think you are comes from that being easy. And so
Mm.
the two games that I put forward on that were like Tactics Ogre, and a game I admit I haven't played, but I've heard very good things about, Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader.
Ah, okay.
Because yeah, both of those like really put you in situations where like, well, with Tactics Ogre, it's more like, what do you consider like the good choice? Like, and knowing that that is not a universal thing. Whereas like Rogue Trader is really focused on like in a world where good choices are like objectively the bad one for you materially, what are you going to do?
Yeah. No, I appreciate those choices. Sorry, because Tactics Ogre caught me off guard.
Mm,
When I realized like halfway through my first playthrough that it was not going the way I thought it would. I'm like, am I the bad guy? And then I played the second time and I'm like, oh my God, this is so different.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's sort of like technically speaking, like neither of the main chains in Tactics Ogre are like the bad guy, but it's very
Mhm.
possible that it's going that like the choices that you like instinctively thought were going to be good were like the things that you
Yeah.
like the things that led to the things that you really don't want to happen. Like I've had similar things with like Shin Megami Tensei, those games where it's like one of my major revelations was like going through like the lore ending for like Strange Journey, and then it took a turn that I really wasn't comfortable with. But then it was just like, oh well, I guess I made this bed.
Yeah. That's what second playthroughs are for. Yeah.
Yeah, but also like I don't think that like Mega 10 games are great for those choices because they also have like the neutral choice, which is like, okay, technically speaking, there is a best option here. Like and like a lot of them, well, a lot of the Shin Megami Tensei games, they take the neutral option as being like the way the current world is, right or wrong, and which is similar to one of the routes for Tactics Ogre, but it's sort of like a lot of them don't really interrogate what that necessarily means in a way that like just leads to them sounding like the best choice. And also, I think a lot of people who play video games like take the hardest route as inevitably like the correct one. So like no, I prefer like the like Disco Elysium, Tactics Ogre, Rogue Trader, they are the ones where it's like, no, they force you to make this bed and lie in it, but they also like don't hide the secret best option somewhere.
Awesome. Well, that is the final question I have. Thank you so much for joining me today. If someone wanted to hear more of what you think on video games, in particular Final Fantasy lore, where would they find you?
You can find me either on Twitter at Cleretic or on YouTube. It's under the name Cleretic, but in the URL, it's Eindos, which is like a name that I used before, and it's like Cleretic's already taken on that front, so it's like
Oh,
I can't take that back. But yeah, like go and check that out. Like the next thing, well, technically, I think the next thing that's going to be coming out is like an episode of a podcast that I do with a friend where we do like very specific side quests. But then, like the next video that's going to be coming out is like sort of like a rundown of like everything we know about what's coming for Dawn Trail.
awesome. And that's an amazing thing to think about. Like the hype is going to
Yeah,
start getting real now that the fan fest is over. So
it is, and I really want to do a like I'm just doing a rundown. It's like, okay, here's everything we know about Turol. Here's everything we know about like female Hrothgar. Here's everything we know about these zones, and that like we're just going info heavy, and then we speculate. Because
awesome.
I hate situations where like people mistake speculation as like fact that they just haven't verified, and I think that happens way too often in this stage of things.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much again for joining us. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and I will see you next time.
Yeah, bye
Bye.
bye.